Hi, my name is Igor, and in this video I will show you how to easily run your .NET project in Docker and Docker Compose through Rider IDE. Here we have a simple .NET API with a single endpoint. This endpoint takes docs file, then parse text from it, create a report and stores it in the database. The classic way to run your project is to click this green arrow here, and Rider automatically builds and runs the project. Let's also check how our endpoint works. Try it out, select a file, execute. And we can see ID of report. Let's also check a database. Reports, yeah, it's here. But in many cases we need to be able to run the project in Docker. So let's go. First of all, we need to add a Docker file. The easiest way to do so is right-click to the project, add Dockerfile. This Docker file is totally okay for our needs right now. We will change it only in the next videos. As you can see, new option is shown up here, so let's try it. As we expose 8080 port in Dockerfile, we need to open localhost 8080 Swagger. And here is it. So let's check endpoint again, try it out. And here is an error. As you can see, EF Core is unable to connect to the database. It happens because of localhost inside Docker container, where our project is running, is different from localhost in the operation system. In appsettings.json, you can see the connection string to database, which is localhost, but this localhost is not enabled in the Docker container, because in Docker container we don't have any database. Currently I am running Postgres database control management system inside the Docker-compose, because it's the easiest and fastest way. So here is docker-compose.yaml file with one service which I call report.db. Image is Postgres 12. I also added environment variables that database and default user is created in the first run of this container. Also, we need volumes to not lose any data after restarting. And ports. This is internal, the default port of Postgres, and this one is external port, which we are able to connect to Postgres, which it is inside container from our local host. Our Postgres is running in this network, so the easiest solution will be to add container with .NET application to the same network. To do this, we need to change configuration, edit, modify, run options, network, and name of the network. Apply, OK. And we also need to change environment variable with database connection. We need it to be in a flat structure. Separator must be 2 underscores. Instead of localhost, we need to use a name of service in Docker Compose. So this one, and port should be internal. Let's edit a configuration again. modify options, enable environment variables, click here, plus name and value. OK, apply, OK. And let's run it again. Execute. And report is created. We can also check the database. Yeah, new report is here. The other option would be to run our .NET project directly via Docker Compose. Let me show you how to do so in Rider. We already have a docker-compose.yaml file, so let's add one more service here. Let's call it report API. We need to build it from current context, and Dockerfile still will be the same. We could also add a depends to our report database that every time report API container is started, report database container is also started. And we need ports. We can use 8081 as external port and 8080 as internal port. And let's also add it to the same network. Now we need to add a new configuration. Edit configuration plus scroll down, Docker Compose. Here we need to select our Docker Compose file. We can leave services empty to run everything. Apply, OK. We also need to set environment variable with database connections to report API container. We could do that like we did with Dockerfile run, but more proper way is to create a .env file in the root directory. If file with a .env name exists in the same directory with Docker Compose YAML file, Docker Compose is able to pick the variables from there. So let's create a .env file and add this environment variable into it. And also it will be very useful to add a solution items folder here and add Docker Compose YAML file and .env file here to quick access. Add existing item, Docker Compose YAML and .env. Yeah, and now we don't need to switch to file system because everything is in solution. And we also need to set this variable here to transfer it to container. And we also miss an important thing here. Edit. We could name it to Docker Compose. And we also need build always, that every time when we made any changes to the code and run it again, it picks changes up and project will be fresh. Apply, OK. And let's check how it's working. Port will be 8081. Try it out, choose file. And report is created. let's check the database. Yeah, it's here. If you need to run only a specific container, you are able to create one more instruction for that, or let's just modify existing one, edit, and here you can select needed services to run. The other way to run Docker Compose is a classic way with a console command, docker compose up, and we can also use -d flag to run it in daemon regime for hiding all logs. It's a tuple here, docker compose up -d. That's it for today. In my next videos I will show you a real world cases where running your apps in Docker makes a huge difference. If this was helpful, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss it. Bye.